students. Today we will be starting Chapter 18, Classification, Biodiversity and Conservation of A2 Level Biology. 9700 is the subject code for A-Level Biology. So let us start. Basically, this chapter is dealing with three main big topics: classification, biodiversity, and conservation. Classification is mainly dealing with how to classify the organisms into different groups and classes. But definitely we have to go into the details. I'm scrolling this down so that you can see in this chapter what we are going actually to focus on. So first of all, we will be focusing on species and how they are classified. The second important point which we will be focusing will be what are the big classes or the domains, rather I should say the domains, the three domains and the kingdoms of the eukaryotic organisms and how to deal with them. And plus we will be talking about the hierarchical classification system as well. So let me scroll down now. So the first main topic is classification. Let me ask you one thing. Why we are given our proper names? Why the people call out our names? And definitely you will say me, so that we could be identified, because there are around 7 billion people on the planet Earth. So of course, to identify them, the names are given. Same is the case with the living organisms. And when I say living organisms, I mean plants and animals both. Bacteria, viruses. Viruses cannot be living organisms. We do not technically put them in living organisms category, but just in a flow I talked about viruses. Anyways, so all the living organisms which are on the planet Earth, they have to be put in such a system so that their identification could be easier, and then we can study them easily, we can do the research about them easily, etc. Now, what is a species? If I ask you as a biology student, what is a species? Probably, or most probably, you'll be telling me that the species are the organisms which look similar to each other. And that's true. That's very true, rather. The living organisms which actually look similar to each other and they are actually living at some particular area, for example, and breeding with one another, and they are producing the offsprings of their own kind, we call them species. Now let's talk about three main types of species definitions which are actually given in your book. So number one is biological species, number two is morphological species, and number three is ecological species. For biology, one very interesting fact is that the terminologies, because they are mostly in Greek and Latin language, so they themselves tell you what the word is saying. So if I say morphological, it means it is taking us to the external appearance of the living organisms. And if I say ecological, it is taking us actually to the ecology. Ecology means the place or the environment where some particular type of living organisms are living over there. So let us first deal with biological species. So biological species, I'm just trying to highlight. Okay, so biological species, they are the species which are actually the organisms appearing similar to each other, and they can breed with one another successfully. And the third important point to focus is that they produce the fertile offsprings. If they cannot do so, we do not put them in the category of biological species. The second is, let me highlight this one, biological species. So those living organisms appearing similar to each other, they can breed among themselves successfully, and they are producing the fertile offsprings. We call them biological species. Okay, now what about morphological species? As the name is indicating, that they should have certain similar morphology. And when we talk about morphology, it means some outward appearance. They should look similar to each other. And anatomy. Anatomy means their internal features, their internal systems, they should also be to a great extent similar to each other. So all those living organisms which are similar in the respect of morphology and anatomy, they are studied under morphological species concept. Then biologists also thought about ecological species. Now, what is ecological species? Ecological species is basically the organisms which are actually sharing some same habitat. They are living somewhere at similar same habitat, and they have similar features or same features, and they basically have put them under the title of ecological species. Now, out of biological species, morphological species, and ecological species, now definitely you'll be a bit confused, like which is basically the species definition. These three species definitions, biologists have thought about it, but when we talk about the main species definition, of course, it will be a biological species definition, and that will be the first one. The ones, the living organisms which appear similar to each other, they can breed among themselves successfully, and they produce the fertile offsprings. So this is the definition which should be the perfect one. It does not mean that the morphological species and ecological species is the wrong one. No, it's not like that. In fact, when the scientists were investigating the species definitions, and they were investigating the species, so they came up with different ideas. And morphological species and ecological species is some of those ideas which actually led them to the main definition of species, which is actually the biological species. It means the living organism appearing similar to each other, and they can breed successfully together, and they produce the fertile offspring. So this is the one which is actually the main definition of a species. Anyways, let us